our webinar, Reskilling Your Employees for Business Relevance in the Tech Age. With us today is Mr. Arjun Nair. Arjun is the co-founder of Great Learning, and he is an alumni of MIT Sloan School of Management and is also a serial entrepreneur. He's passionate about using technology to make high quality learning accessible to learners for all over the world, and is also a fitness enthusiast and loves to play squash. Arjun, thank you for joining us today. And I'll pass it on over to you.
Thank you, Shivam, and welcome everyone to this webinar. It's wonderful to see you all here. I've had a chance to also take a look at where you're coming from, and it's wonderful to see that many of you are coming from different parts of the world. So welcome again for joining in from different parts of the world and working with different time zones. It's again great to see you here. I hope this webinar will be both interesting as well as interactive. There are a few thought-provoking ideas that I want to share with you, and of course I want to learn about your questions as well, and what we can do to help you navigate this complex age that we live in right now. So we're talking about some disruption that's happening in the world, and I'll set it up, and then we'll of course talk about specifically how we are contributing to solving the problem that many organizations are facing today. But before we get into the meat of the presentation, since some of you may not know about Great Learning, I want to give a few minutes to talk about what we do as well. A quick check, I hope everybody can hear me. Shivam, everybody can hear me okay?
I'm able to hear you pretty clearly.
Okay, wonderful. And at any point, if you have questions, please type them out, and then we'll answer them and then go along as well at intervals. So Great Learning, so far, we started about 6 years back. The idea behind that, we wanted to reskill and develop talent for the new age, for the digital economy that we live in. We've been quite successful in that mission so far. Over 12,000 learners have gone through our programs. And one of the things that I want to differentiate about us is that we are focused on learning outcomes. So, you may see that other platforms will have a few millions, but for us, it's all pretty much every 12,000 of them have completed the course and have had a career outcome or a successful transition happening to them, right? Because these are longer duration programs, and they are the equivalent of doing, let's say, a master's or so on, right? And to enable that to happen, we work with over 1,000 mentors and faculty members, having delivered over 6 million hours of learning and working with over 200 hiring partners. So we are positioned very similar to what a university would look like. And then that's the type of programs that we offer. And the metrics that we are tracking are also exactly around that, of students taking our programs. Many of them are 6 months to 1 year long, and then having a full career transition or outcome at the end of that. To deliver our programs, we work with some of the best institutions, academic institutions in the world: Stanford Graduate School of Business, Stanford Center for Professional Development, Texas McCombs School of Business, Purdue University, and of course Great Lakes Institute of Management in India as well. And we offer a range of courses suited for the digital economy in cloud computing, full stack, DevOps, cybersecurity, data science, machine learning, AI, data analytics, business analytics, deep learning, and now we have a bunch of new programs in the pipeline around design thinking and digital marketing and general business concepts as well. Happy to talk more about these later. Now let's set up what we're talking about, right? Now, if you look at each of these companies on the left, right, and I were to ask you this question, unfortunately, I'm not able to do animation here, but if you could not have seen the images on the right, now it's quite intuitive, but if you did not see those and had that question asked to you, who's your biggest competitor? Now, the CEO of Hilton would have probably said it's Marriott or one of the other hotel chains. And if I asked you the question, where do you get all your news from? To a lot of you would have found or would have traditionally thought of Times of India or Economic Times or Financial Times or whatever it is, right? But nowadays, everybody gets their news from Facebook and Twitter and Google News and so on, right? And the one on the left, bottom left, I'm sure everyone is very familiar with. No one uses a taxi cab anymore. We use Uber and Lyft and Ola and Grab or whichever it is that we are most comfortable with. Now, the reason why I've put this out here is to provoke that thought, really, which is these companies on the left have been there for 100, 150 years. I mean, taxi companies have been there for several decades. Hilton, of course, is a 150-year-old organization, and so is New York Times. Whereas the ones on the right have been there only for 10 years. Facebook a little longer, 15 years, but everything else has been, basically under 10 years. So how is it that companies which have been there only for a few years have disrupted industry giants, right? So that's really the thought that I want you to think about for a few minutes. And then as we go along, we'll discuss a few case studies, and then it'll become very apparent as to what is happening in the digital economy and why there is a talent gap that's happening, and why these companies are able to win, and what kind of talent are they creating, and what do they have access to, why are they ahead, and what happens if you do not have a similar talent, right? So that's what we're going to talk about as we go along. So one way to think about what's happening is to think of the four industrial revolutions, right? I won't go into a lot of details. I'm sure all of us are familiar here with this. The first 2-3 industrial revolutions brought about significant improvements in human productivity, powered through water and steam, mechanical devices, and of course the PC era, which all of us lived through, and then significantly improved human productivity, right? But now we are actually living through what's being called as the fourth industrial revolution, right? It's very evident if you start looking around, and that's really an amalgamation of many different technologies and services coming together, which is creating very fascinating experiences for consumers, right? Mobile, cloud, smart devices, cyber systems, robots, everything is coming together, and everybody is experiencing this in our daily life. If I were to ask the question, how many of you are wearing a Fitbit or a health tracker? I'm sure many of you are, right? And if you actually take one more step and think about how is this working, what's really happening is that it's a IoT device. It's got sensors. It's monitoring your physiological parameters in real time. It's taking that and then sending it onto a cloud. Most likely AWS. I'm not sure. Depending on which one you are using, it's going to be Azure or AWS. It's going to sit there, and then some kind of machine learning algorithm is running, and it's probably giving you feedback after running some analytics. Some data science algorithms are running to give you feedback to say, okay, you need to do this. You're being tense right now, or your quality of sleep was not great, and you need to change this to become more productive tomorrow. Right? They're probably now putting together more social concepts along with that and saying, this is what your friends are doing to create a more awareness and urge you to act. So this is the world that we live in, right? And it's a very fascinating world, which is rapidly changing. And that's why it's called the fourth industrial revolution, because all of these technologies are now coming together, which were disparate just a few years ago. And now if you actually think back about the companies that we put on the right, be it Airbnb, Uber, and Facebook and so on, and really think about why are these companies succeeding? What did they do which is different from the other ones on the left? It's because they brought all of these things together. Cloud and internet and analytics and mobile and social, all of these different concepts and technologies are being brought together to understand consumers far better, far faster, provide services which are really getting the industrial giants caught off guard. And that's, again, going back to the disruption that we talked about and why some companies are winning and others are struggling. And as I'm told that everybody who's coming for this webinar is an HR professional, and many leaders as well. And I'm sure you are facing this in your organizations when you see and the kind of work that's coming in, the talent that is there, and the ones who are moving ahead and the ones who are falling behind. If you think about who are the ones who are really moving forward, you'll actually start seeing patterns and their ability to use digital technologies, digital concepts far better. And that's where the talent gap really exists. So I don't need to talk about it. It's very aware for you already. So let's talk about a few case studies. I won't take a lot of time on this. If I were to ask the question on the left, I'll give you the answer because we can't make this interactive, but I'll give you the answer. But on the left, what is that? A few minutes to think, for a few seconds to think. Some of you would have thought about a jet engine, and that's what it is. And if you think of who manufactures jet engines, it's usually Rolls-Royce, GE, Pratt and Whitney, and so on. And jet engines cost millions of dollars, right? Typically, these are sold as an asset, which is for millions of dollars. However, now they've changed their business model and are offering this as a service, because GE can now use analytics and understand far more about jet engines or their jet engines in real time, how well they are performing. They can use predictive analytics to figure out when to maintain it and provide a service, an additional service to the customers who are buying jet engines to say now that you are going to pay for X number of hours of flying time as opposed to millions of dollars that you pay in a one-time. So now if you ask the question, why is GE doing that? There are many answers. Some of you would have already thought about it. So these would be things like reduce the cost, improve loyalty, provide an additional service and generate more revenue. All of these are true, right? All of these are reasons why you want to change your business model from selling something costing millions of dollars to providing it as a service, and you pay an X amount per flying time, and it makes sense to do it, right? Now, if you were to extend that thought, and this is available, if you can search on Google, you'll find the chief economist of GE talking about it, where GE has actually started thinking about all assets as a service, right? Rather than thinking of assets using data, using analytics, using machine learning, using cloud technologies, basically using all the digital technologies we've talked about earlier, and then change their business model where it's all provided as a service for the reasons that we talked about earlier: reduce cost, improve loyalty, use all these technologies to provide improved and better services. So now if you were to extend that thought, that's likely what's going to happen to your washing machine, right? That's where I wanted to get to with this. Everybody would have faced a situation, whether it's your washing machine or your TV or your microwave, that just stopped working one day and you had to now chase the LG or the GE professional and then call them and ask them to come. Whereas the world would be so much better if the LG professional calls you and then says that in the next 3 days your washing machine is going to fail. I'd like to call and then set up an appointment to come and fix it, right? You would absolutely love that, and then you would rather want that. Of course, that means that privacy is going to go for a toss. They know everything about your life. All of those are true, but at the same time, you would rather pay for that service, right? So that's an example of how business model is changing and is being changed by a large industrial giant such as GE. Now, if you think of the company on the right, the car on the right, everybody knows that's a Tesla. What's interesting is that Tesla is worth almost as much as GM, which is again a 150 or 100-year-old company with billions of dollars of revenue, whereas Tesla is burning money and not fuel. So why is a company that's burning money more valued similar to GM, which is actually profitable now? They had a problem several years back, but I believe GM and even Toyota, for that matter, if you pick that up, these companies are profitable. Again, the answer lies because in analytics, data science, in their ability to use newer technologies to provide preventive maintenance, understand consumers better, provide services, and so on, right? In fact, Tesla thinks of a car as a software which happens to have a body on top of it, right? That's how they're thinking about it. which none of the other auto manufacturers are thinking about. So that's fundamentally how, again, a sector like automobiles are being transformed, right? If you think of on the left, Nike, of course, they've come up with this new technology. Some of you would have heard of this. This is called a self-lacing shoe. It made a big splash a few months back. But more importantly, what I found out later, and you can again find this, Nike is hiring several hundreds of data scientists. Why is Nike hiring data scientists? It's an apparel company. And not just Nike, if you can, many other apparel companies are hiring data scientists because now they've realized that you need data scientists to figure out what consumers want, what kind of services are they looking for. So there are jobs at traditional manufacturing companies, apparel companies, which are going to go towards cloud computing, AI, machine learning, analytics, and so on. Right? Bottom right is Echo, which is of course Amazon's product, which uses machine learning and speech recognition to enable you to get what you want. Right? Another example of how future of retail is going to look like, which is largely going to be based on speech. Right? So again, the reason why I brought up these examples is that in all of these companies, the nature of work is changing, and as professionals, as HR, as business leaders who need to now adopt, I'm sure again you're seeing these changes happening. Or if you're on the services side, you'd need to be providing these services to these companies as well, and that's the motivation for this these set of examples. Now, you may think that some of the examples that I talked about in the previous slide are in a global context. However, I want to bring that back to India and then say that it's not a global phenomenon. It's a very much happening in India as well. Some of you would have heard of this company, which Anil Kumble started, along with a couple of others, called Spectacom, which is a combination, which is basically these cricket bats, which has got a sticker on it, and it's measuring the ball, how the batsman played the ball. It's then sent, that information is sent in real time to Azure. So they're doing this with Microsoft. So it's stored on Azure, and Azure has got ML and AI capability to run algorithms on that and get real-time feedback to the coaches, as well as engage fans and create a very interesting atmosphere in the field, right? So again, a fantastic example of IoT, cloud, and data science technologies coming together. There's a company called MoneyTap, which gives you a loan instantaneously. How do they do that? Interestingly, some of you would think of it being collecting information from you. It is collecting information from you, but in a very tricky and interesting way. What you actually do once you install the app is to allow MoneyTap to read through all your SMS, right? And nowadays we know that we get our salary on our SMS. We know that we get we pay all our bills using our credit cards, and that also goes to our SMS. So MoneyTap, using analytics, after reading through your SMS for the last several months, is able to figure out your risk profile and is doing a far better job than the bank teller, and can understand how much of a loan should you be given at what rate. Darwin Box is an interesting example from the HR domain. Some of you might be using that already. It's a company, homegrown company based out of Hyderabad, and invested, I think recently Lightspeed invested some money in them. And basically they provide services to companies, figure out, again, using analytics and data science along with other services, but you can figure out whether some of your employees are going to quit. Lots of analytics and HR is being applied as well. So India is very much part of it. Lots of interesting work is being done in India using these new age technologies as well. Okay, so now let's go to the second part of what we're talking about, which is going to be specifically around what's happening in companies. And we engage with a lot of companies, as I talked about earlier. We work with nearly 200 hiring partners who hire our learners. And as I said, again, when you look at the 12,000 learners, you need to look at the 12,000 in the context of a university, because that's exactly what we do. It's not a short duration, superficial course. The courses that we offer are very deep, and long duration with substantial learning outcomes, similar to what you would do if you were to go to a full-time program for a year. That's what we aim to achieve with north of 90% completion, very rigorous courses, and because of that, when we talk to these companies, we are very familiar with the type of challenges that they're facing, right? Now, again, a lot of this you might be familiar with, but I'm talking about it to set the right context, which is that when this is a survey that was done by NASSCOM, asking which technologies will have the most impact. Right? They asked a bunch of companies, so familiar faces: big data, cloud computing, social mobile technologies, robotics, IoT, machine learning, AI, data science. Right? Exactly what we would have thought. If you look at the number of jobs in India, and this is in analytics, if you look in the last 3-4, it's a little hard to see, but it's December 2018. So if you look at what has happened in the last in basically 1 year of 2018, it's almost looking like a hockey stick now, right? And 19 this year, it's even more accelerating. Percentage of companies looking to invest in various up-and-coming technologies. Again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this list, but just to call them out: big data analytics, IoT, web apps. So this is similar to what the full stack programming, machine learning, cloud computing, AR and VR, encryption, cybersecurity, digital wearables, right, and a host of others. But this is exactly what companies are looking to invest in the next couple of years. Now, if you look at the demand and supply gap, so this is by the Capgemini Talent Gap report. Some of you might have seen this as well. Very clearly, companies are talking about the talent gap that exists within their organizations, right? So 70% of them believe that it has been widening in the US, and in India, it's about 65% of them believe that, right? Very interesting study here, again, by NASSCOM, focused on India largely, which talk about the demand and supply gap for specifically AI and big data skills. On the further left, 800,000 is the demand that is there going to be in 2021. In 2018, it was 510,000, so that's significantly increasing. Whereas the supply for that is not keeping pace, so that's actually widening, right? So from 2018 to 2021, the supply of talent for the skill sets that we talked about, AI, big data, and so on, is actually widening, and this is happening across many other similar technologies as well. In our conversations with HR, I want to talk about a few of those, and then we can, of course, answer. I can take questions both about what we covered earlier, as well as what's going to come later. Right? Do you have any questions? If you do have questions, please type it out, and then I'll answer them as we go along. Right? So don't hold all your questions later. Please type them out, and then we'll put them together and then answer. So as soon as you get the questions, please do type them out. So average life of a core skill, be it analytics, data science, machine learning, 5 to 6 years. Right? What's happening is that technology is changing rapidly. Earlier we talked. For a simple example, everybody talked about R, SaaS, for example. Everyone was talking about SaaS 3-4 years back. Then it became R, and now it's all Python, right? And then it was analytics a few years back, became data science. Then it's machine learning, AI, and so on. So again, rapidly, it's changing fast. 4-5 years later, you realize that the technology has actually moved. And some new technology is coming every 3 to 4 years. And that's why the average life of a core skill is only 5-6 years. Nearly 50% of the knowledge jobs are at risk in the next 10 years. So across all the companies, most of it is going to be driven through automation, machine learning, AI. A lot of these jobs are going to go away. However, the flip side of it is those with that skill set are going to have amazing success, because you're going to create a lot more jobs where they need to know analytics, data science, machine learning, and so on. Non-tech companies are increasingly taking to these technologies. We talked about this earlier, right? And are building captive strength, so that they can actually be part of the digital revolution that is happening.
Mr. Arjun,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but we have a question from Mr. Sampath, and he asked that will the sales function also get impacted by this, and if so, how?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, I was going to talk about, we've done something with uh, with uh, a client with a large company, enabling working with their sales team. I was going to talk about this earlier, but a few things I wanted to talk about. One is that one is just basically the sales team themselves needing to know some of these concepts better, so that they can do their roles better. Forecasting, for example, right? There is far more capability today to do forecasting, far more accurate than what is being done earlier. So, in terms of where the new business is going to come from, who's likely going to come back and purchase your product, who is dissatisfied, who's going to churn. So there's a lot of analytics just being used by the sales teams itself. So again, going back to the example of a company that's not using anything and then just hard selling versus someone who's using analytics, the sales team using analytics to be able to understand customers better and improve their services, is going to have a far more advantage. And the ones who are not using it is clearly going to go out of business. As we saw earlier, right? Why is Hilton? I mean, Hilton is still there; it's a strong brand, but why is Airbnb growing so much more rapidly? I'm sure Hilton has a great marketing and sales team. It's just that these guys are using analytics far more, and that's happening across, right? Across. So that's one way to think about it. The sales team themselves will need to know analytics, data science. In fact, there are many learners who enroll with us who are coming from a sales function, so that they can get better at forecasting and understand consumer behavior, segment. If they've bought something, what are they likely going to buy again? So you can use analytics for these, right? Number two is that then what are you selling itself, right? So that's the other way to think about it. Earlier, when you were selling something, you're selling a certain product or software or technology, whatever it is, right? Now, if the customer is sophisticated, the customer is always going to ask for some kind of data science, analytics, ML, AI capability. So if your sales team has no idea what it is, then they're going to struggle to be able to sell. So two things have to happen. First of all, the company that you work for definitely needs to adopt the skill set and develop capabilities in these areas, and then equip the sales team to be able to sell these new capabilities that the company has actually built. And that's in fact exactly what we did for one of our clients. They came to us and said that it's a large company in India with more than a lakh of employees, who came to us and said that they are having to sell cloud technologies, but the sales team doesn't really know what cloud technologies are, and they're not able to sell it anymore, because earlier they were selling software, which was easy to understand, but now they need to sell cloud. So they wanted us to teach their sales team on cloud, and then we actually developed the capability for doing that. So I hope that answers that question. Your earlier slide mentioned the eligible fresh talent gap is small, whereas the experienced talent is wider. What are the contributing factors for both? As I'm aware, they could be different. So fresh, the eligible fresh talent gap is small, whereas the experienced talent gap is wider. Because and that again goes back to some of these companies with fresh talent. What is happening is that the folks are actually willing to learn these things faster. There is this inertia that is always there with experienced folks to be able to to now to jump into the new technology. Now there is part of the inertia is actually real. The real part of it is that there is something that they are working on right now, which is enabling them to get a paycheck, and there is something that they need to spend their attention on. Whereas this new technology is going to be something that they need 6 months down the line. So their job is not a threat today, but it's something that could be a threat a few months down the line. So that's the real part of the inertia, and part of it, the not real part of the inertia, but also important is the fact that folks after a certain number of years, maybe they're in their mid-30s, early 40s, kind of find it difficult to learn new technologies. They may not necessarily be as adventurous with internet and learning over online, and using platforms that are now available for learning, right? So they're not used to doing that, whereas the younger folks are, basically they grew up on that with the era of iPad and YouTube. So they're just adopting to technology faster. So that's sort of what I would think. But there are mechanisms to counter that. There are ways in which we can get the more senior guys to learn as well, by providing more support, by creating innovations around how courses are delivered using a blended approach where part of the learning happens online and part of it happens offline. So there are ways in which we can solve the problem, but that's really what the problem is. How the skill sets can be used in the procurement department of IT services sector. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but two different areas is one on again goes back to reducing costs, right? So IT services sector. Um, so here there are different parts, right? One is if you're talking about the IT within a company itself. A lot of IT earlier was in-house, as you know, it's all set internally, whereas now it's all on the cloud. So obviously that's one big change that's happened, and now the entire IT team has to be retrained to now do the IT setup on cloud, right? Because it's far cheaper, and there's better redundancy and tolerance to faults and failures. So it just makes sense to move to cloud. So that's one. Now, if you're within the IT department, right now, if you're talking about the procurement department of an IT services sector, then that's a very specific question. Now, if you look at procurement is one of the areas where you can look at things like where is cost going to end up at, right? Again, you use analytics to predict what your costs are going to look like. Where is wastage happening? What are things that you are buying but not using right now and is sitting in inventory, right? So there's a lot of analytics that you can apply there to solve those problems. As I said, I won't go into details of how you can do that. But thank you, all great questions, and please keep them coming. So there's a study by Aspiring Minds, and this everybody talks about. So which is that 5% of the engineering graduates can actually program competently, right? So that's again the reason, and that's because of a failure of our engineering colleges, especially the second tier, third tier engineering colleges, to not create graduates. I was recently speaking to a gentleman at TCS, who's the head of head of recruitment at TCS, and that's exactly what he's saying, and that's why most companies invest heavily on training their freshers. If the engineering colleges did a great job, they wouldn't have to do that. But that itself is changing. Earlier it was software, other skill set, but now it's becoming new age: data science, machine learning, AI. And in fact, we recently worked with another client of ours, which was the largest fresher onboarding project that we worked on. So this company brought in 400 new hires from many. In fact, they actually hired them from the premier institutes in India: IITs, IIMs, NITs, and so on. So they hired them from these engineering and MBA schools, and then they wanted to get them to learn data science and machine learning and AI. And they said that internally, if you were to do this training academy for 400 people on these new skill set, it's going to take us a lot of time and effort to actually deliver it. But since we are an expert, they asked us to help them with it, and we just completed the largest fresher onboarding project, where we trained their entire fresher workforce, and it had huge impact. I have a case study later where we enable the company to save several crores worth of several millions of dollars, in fact, and time as well, right? Mid-level talent stays an average of 16 to 18 months, partly because of startup ecosystem and the company's own internal skill development not keeping pace to fill that gap. Early skill adopters drawing disproportionate benefit, right? So this is what we're seeing. Those who know AI, machine learning, data science, and so on are getting massive salaries and have honestly more options to switch. And if there are poor internal dynamics or not opportunities for growth, once they get the skill set, then they will go to the organizations where they have. So the HR, from HR's perspective, just to refresh what's already familiar to you, time to identify skilled candidates is growing exponentially. Retaining talent is expensive. Standard short L&D interventions fail, right? This is really important. You can't do anything in like 2 days, 1 week, to learn a hard concept like data science or machine learning or AI. Those are just, it just doesn't work. You cannot learn this in a few days. You can just cover a bunch of concepts for checking a box, but if you really want to transform your workforce, and if you want to, even if it's 20, 30, 50 people, and if you really want them to learn, you may actually need to do this for a few weeks or months. And then you need to create a learning culture. It's a noisy marketplace because there are lots of different courses that are offered there. So how do you choose among all of that? So cost of reskilling versus cost of hiring, right? You may know your metrics internally, but folks say that it's actually 20%. Recent study of the annual salary at junior levels, and at senior levels, it can be even like double their salary. So you should do everything that you can to actually reskill and retain rather than try to hire from outside, right? And then there's of course loss in productivity and so on. And employees want to stay with companies that provide skilling opportunities. Classic corporate dilemma: what if we train them and they leave, and what if we don't and then they stay, right? The answer is, well, I think everybody should probably take the former. Let's train them, even if some of them leave. The ones who stayed will take the company forward, right? You'd rather have that rather than it end up being the case where everybody in the company is not skilled and then is going to drop. Anyway, the company is going to fail. Second is a recipe for disaster. So now let's talk about a few case studies, and then we'll wrap up in about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can just take questions in the last 15 minutes. Some of this I've already talked about. So we partnered with a lot of companies. So fresher onboarding, sourcing talent. So we have many learners, early career professionals who come to our courses, and then once they finish, it's in data science, analytics, AI, machine learning. So we provide talent to companies. Skilling providing them with the necessary skill set, deploying them within the organizations, and of course, if the company is already hired, so it can happen in two different ways. One, of course, we will get it from the market and then provide the talent to the organization. Or if the organization, as I told you earlier, has already hired the talent and we need to upskill them, then we do that as well. Lateral talent development. So we work with organizations to upskill, reskill, and retain. And we have a number of events. If any of you have questions, we'll talk about that. So these are GL Accelerate, which is offering a host of services around developing the necessary skill set to succeed in organizations, job boards, career fairs. We do hackathons, live projects, one-on-one mentorship, career mentorship, and so on, right? And we provide that across, this is just a subset of companies, many more companies as well. So a complex diagram, but this is basically how we work. It's not very hard to understand. We work with clients, understand requirements, a business head, L&D, HR partners, and so on. Create the custom program that the organization needs. Understand the requirements better through surveys. Kick off. Then there's an ongoing governance once the program starts. These are typically, as I said, 3 months to 6 months. We can do short duration courses, but very specific to a skill set. But ideally, the longer duration ones are the ones that are going to be needed to really create transformation in terms of learning experience. We work very closely with the team. So our internal infrastructure, Olympus is our internal learning management system, WhatsApp groups, one-on-one calls to ensure that students actually complete the program. So this is where we really make a difference from just giving access to content. We work very proactively with our learners, and that's why I said we are far more focused on creating a small set of people. So which is why we are not chasing tens of thousands or millions of learners. That's not our objective, even if it is several thousands. But even if it's only several thousand, but they have a real transformative learning experience, right? So that is what can be expected, which means that it is going to be high touch. We provide a lot of service. We provide one-on-one. Think exactly what it would be had you send them to a university, right? But part-time. So that's what we focus: rigorous assessments, personalized feedback on assessments. All of that will happen. And if something is not working, we work closely with our clients to correct the course. There's a lot of doing. So they work on a number of projects and quizzes and hackathons and so on to just get a very hands-on feel to solving problems and being ready to apply them right away, so that when they go back into the company, they are productive, right? So this is, again, as I said, it's very different from giving access to some content with some quizzes. We basically take the onus to ensure that they learn, right? I don't know if there are many companies that say that, but we absolutely guarantee that those who come into our course will learn. And if they have a desire to learn, then we'll make sure that they actually learn, right? And then provide the post-program feedback to the clients. Few case studies. This is the company that I talked about, where we provided the largest. This is the largest fresher onboarding in India. They wanted to train 400 new graduates that they just hired. So it's a large company based in New York, but they have a large team in India. Offer insurance, banking, financial services, consulting company, ITES in the ITES industry. Trained employees should be able to hit the ground running. That is their objective. Training at scale without loss in quality, and create a highly engaging training program, which would lead to lower attrition as well. So they cared about that. What we did is we created a custom program for them, which had 50 hours of video content, many projects to practice and hone skills. There were weekly assessments to evaluate learning outcomes, hackathons that were done. These are basically live competitions that are done online as well as physically. And every weekend we did a mentored learning session. So essentially we had a live webinar by an industry expert who would be an expert in data science, analytics, machine learning. So these students, we would organize them into groups of 15, 20, 25. So the students would come for these sessions and then clarify their doubts, learn from each other, learn from the mentor, work on more projects, so that when they go back, they're actually ready to hit the ground running, right? Created a dashboard so that the senior management can see how effective the learning journey has been for them. And the outcome, and this is what is really impressive for me, is that we trained and got the freshers job ready in 3 months compared to what they had previously done over 6 months. So this was their largest hire, which is why they came to us. I think if they were hiring, maybe 50, 60, 100 people, I don't think they would have come to us. But because it was 400, they were not sure how to do it. And earlier it took 6 months for them to get productive. So we got that done in 3 months, and then result as a saving of 3 months, as well as a cost saving of nearly 12 CR, right? Increased productivity of the new hires, which led to them being put on projects faster, leading to increased revenue, right? Any questions on this? So this is a case study from the ITES industry on fresher onboarding, right? So, and we are working with a number of other companies also who are looking to large companies essentially. We can do this for smaller companies as well, but where there are, let's say, several freshers that are being hired, then we can create custom programs depending on that company's need to ensure that they have the necessary, they are ready to hit the ground running. The way I would position this to a business leader at the company is to say that teaching and training is not the company's core competency. It is to solve problems for clients, whereas that is what our core competency is. That's what we live and breathe. That's what we've been doing for the last several years and having excellent outcomes. So if at all a company needs to, to focus on what they're good at, this is a great way to save costs and have better outcomes. Second example is for a company in the IT-BPO space. So this is a company, Fortune 500 company, Indian MNC in the IT and BPO sector, employing over 1.2 lakh employees across 90 companies, catering to 900 clients, right? This is the problem that I talked about earlier around the sales team. The sales team was keeping on going back to the tech team asking for details. So they were not able to effectively sell some of the new technologies that are there. And due to their limited technical skills, the sales team was not able to identify what products to cross-sell, and there was a loss in, there's an opportunity cost, there's a loss in opportunities, right, and revenue. And the sales team's lower technical knowledge was also leading to the customers losing faith. So we created a custom program for the sales team to understand cloud technology, cloud computing, and then help them understand the client's requirements better, and then provide that and be able to sell more and then generate more business in these new areas. So the sales team was across various geographies. So we provided an online course for those with limited or no technical background. And the program, again, as I said, is not just theory plus something practical hands-on, so that they really can provide consultation. Otherwise, again, you may know a few terms, but you're not going to be able to provide consultative sales, and that's what is really needed to win business. So we are able to get the team to the place where they are able to actually do that. This is what we did: 70 hours of training program. The program covered cloud concepts to develop a holistic understanding of the technology, practical application of the course to understand the needs of the customer. Improved credibility. Sales managers could now draw a cloud migration map for customers through an understanding of the latest trends, faster sales cycles, and improved revenue stream, enhanced customer experience, right? So again, real case studies. We are working with many clients on this. This is what we did for a large insurance company. So it's one of the largest in the world, $50 billion north of market cap. Again, they have a presence in India. The company has more than 100 offices in 6 continents, writes premiums for insurance and reinsurance. So there are only a host full of these guys. So you could potentially think of the one among the 4 or 5 large ones, right? Revenue, charging premiums in line with the analysis of the associated risks with the customer, renewals of policy by customers once it expires, right? That's where they get their business from. The problem statement was to enable the teams to manage the increased complexity of the parameters and provide them with requisite skills to deliver accurate predictions. So basically, they had a lot of, this is a classic problem that a lot of companies face, which is what I talked about earlier, where banks are a great example. So there were tellers at many banks. Once ATMs came, then the tellers are not really needed to hand out cash, but they needed to be retained on doing something else, which are more value-added services. So that's exactly what is happening across all the companies with analytics, AI, machine learning. It's far easier to assess the risk profile of consumers. You don't need an underwriter to do that. But whereas you need people who now have the ability to develop machine learning algorithms and use data science to do a better job with it, to reduce your risk and improve your margins. So the idea is to retrain the existing workforce. It was a mix of professionals with varied levels of technical experience. And again, these were geographically spread across the country. And so we created a custom program for them as well, which involved learning all the cutting edge analytics trends, employees were able to use the contemporary data modeling techniques to create accurate models. So one of the things that we also do is that we ask the employees to pick a certain project from within their organization. So all our courses have a capstone project, and we tell the learners who are doing this from these organizations to work on a project that the organization cares about, so that you are again not only learning something, and instead of working on dummy data and dummy projects, you're working on a real project, and you can show impact at the organization right away, and then justify the cost of the training, because now you worked on a project while you did learn all of this, but you learned what you learned all these concepts, but you actually worked on a real project and then generated value for the business almost immediately, right? So we ask our corporate partners to provide the employees who are doing these training programs with a meaningful project and a data set to work on, because that's how they'll reap the most benefit for the investment that they're making, because they're not only retaining the workforce, but they're also getting important problems solved. So employees without any technical expertise were able to follow the course and add a new skill set. Technically proficient employees were able to upgrade their capabilities and learn new modeling skills. So that's mostly it from my end. We have another 5-10 minutes, so I can take some questions. But thank you so much for attending this webinar and being here. And I hope you will reach out to us for the training needs that you may have within your organizations. I hope that this presentation also helped you learn something about what's happening in the world around us with disruptions in the area of machine learning, AI, data science, and how that's impacting organizations across sectors. And of course, now we can take some questions. So there's a question here, I think. How can this training program help engineers from operations department? Again, we work with actually a number of organizations where these are operations heavy. So there are many applications of analytics and operations, right? Optimization, for example, optimization techniques, where you're trying to reduce costs, use your resources in the most effective manner. So that analytics can be applied a lot. So engineers need to know that. Many times in operations, you need to forecast what your demand is going to be. So there are various analytic techniques that can be used for forecasting demand. And now, as I said, if you're able to accurately forecast demand, then you will be able to save cost and then staff up correctly and maximize the business potential, because you've now built capacity ahead of that, right? So you'll have an advantage over competition. So ultimately, competition is going to be like this in the future. So those with the skill set will be able to compete better, and those without the skill set is going to get left behind or going to go out of business. So engineers in the operations department, if they already don't know analytics and are not already using data science and machine learning, they absolutely need to, because your competitor is using all of that and is going to win over your business if you don't equip your engineers with that necessary skill set.
I would like to say this to HRs that if you have any questions that is related to revolves around training your employees and how it can benefit you, please do type it down, because this is a chance, and I think Mr. Arjun would be the perfect person to ask all these things. I think, Mr. Arjun, there are no more questions
Sure.
to answer right now. So, thanks a lot for joining us today, and it was a very insightful session. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope all the attendees enjoyed it too. For everyone else, if you have a question, please do send it to us across email. We'll be sending you a recording of this webinar and the PPT as well. I am currently pasting. Oh, sorry. We have a question from Rakesh that says, so one last question. Can we also use this for establishing lean manufacturing?
See, lean manufacturing is a different set of principles, right? It's about which of course developed in the in Japan with the whole Toyota model of working. So the answer is yes and no, right? It's a different methodology. It's a different concept. In lean manufacturing, in certain cases, using analytics, data science, AI, and machine learning is going to be useful. However, I can't say that if you use analytics, then you will be able to implement lean manufacturing, because there are many more aspects to lean manufacturing than just analytics. So I would think of this as a Venn diagram with two circles intersecting, right? Lean manufacturing is one, analytics is the other, and there is some commonality between the two where you need to use both, but it's not like a super simple. So yes, you can use this, but that's not the only thing that's needed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Arjun. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar.
Thank you so much, and have a good afternoon.